So we are going to start mixing our colors for our color wheel, and up to this point we've done value, and we've done the Pali's palette, which is the earth palette, and now we're moving to the fully chromatic palette. This will have colors that are saturated and of course with more intensity, a lot brighter than what we've been doing so far. And the colors that you're gonna need for this assignment, for this fully chromatic color wheel, are what I've got here, which is cadmium yellow light, ultramarine blue, and cadmium red. This is cadmium red medium, and this is from the Utrecht brand. I have this old, very old tube, but it's still good. I hardly ever use I use mostly that of Pali's palette, so I have a lot of old, intense chromatic colors that I've had for years, but this is like I said, cadmium red medium. You can also get cadmium red light, but I think if you go cadmium red light, it starts to look too much like an orange. And if you mix cadmium red light with ultramarine, instead of getting a violet, you're gonna get a brown. So that's why I prefer cadmium red medium. Cadmium red deep might be too dark and might start to venture into the red violets. So I think this is just right. And of course we're gonna mix the colors. We've got the primary, we'll mix the secondary, tertiary colors. They're gonna go around this, around this color wheel. They'll be taking up these spaces here. And like we did with the Pali's palette, we're gonna put white to make them, to line them up. We're gonna make tints. A tint is the color plus white. That is a way of lightening the color. But the full intensity of the color will be along these spaces. And then later on, I don't know if on the camera if you can see these squares, kind of like value scales. But here what we're gonna do is we will mix complements to neutralize them, and also to darken and to lighten complements. And I'll talk about that later. But first, we need these three colors: ultramarine blue, cadmium yellow light, cadmium red medium. Off to the side I've got white, and I'm gonna use I've got several brushes, some fairly inexpensive brushes. I can't remember what I used for the other color wheel. I want to say I used something like this to fill it in here. But most of the mixing I'll do with my palette knives. You have to be careful with palette knives. This I've had for a long time, and you do this for a long time, and for months, for years. And this I've had for over 10 years. These, you can see, become very sharp. So they become kind of dangerous. This is, I would venture to say that you could probably cut a steak fairly easy with this. This is very sharp. So just you want to be aware of that, because when you're doing this, it starts to get very sharp. Now you might hear the janitors come in here. I can hear them on the hallway. They might venture in here. They might interrupt a little bit. So I will start off. I have also here the color wheel. I've got this color wheel just to use as a reference, you know. But I posted that along on the blog and on the announcement on Blackboard for you guys. And I'm going to start off by mixing. I like to start in this area right here. We'll mix the secondary color, which is green, then yellow green, and blue green. And so of course for that you're gonna need blue. We'll see how this looks, and then adjust. And we're gonna put some cadmium yellow. And this you know, color is one of the visual elements, and it is one of the more attractive, one of the more, I don't know, I want to say seductive. I mean, color really attracts the viewer to the paintings. And so this can become, you know, getting the right colors, mixing colors, can become quite an obsession. You know, there's so many variations in color combinations. See, this is I feel a good green. I think green needs to look like something that came out of a leaf. It has to have that leaf or grass-like quality. See, it's interesting. My canvas is white, and put over the white. See how dark it looks. I'm thinking it might need a little bit more yellow, cadmium yellow. So I'm gonna get, so that I don't get my yellow dirty, I'm gonna wipe this off. And see, this is when you have to be careful with the sharpness of your palette knives. This is when you can cut yourself. And even though this is very sharp, I like it because it's so pointy. So on this color wheel, I feel that this for me is more like the blue green, and I feel this is more like the actual green. And I think in this color wheel, according to this color wheel, it needs another yellow green. So I'm gonna use this as a guide for my green. So I'm gonna mix this. I think this should be enough of this yellow here. I think this is looking to me very grass-like, very vegetable-like. You want to get that fresh green that you see during the springtime. There's a day during spring where the trees are this beautiful green, very fresh, very vibrant. See, I think this just as a start. See here, see, it's, I don't want it quite this light, but I want it a little bit lighter than what's here. So I want to go a little bit more yellow. See, I don't know, I might have gone too far here. And like I did with the earth palette, you know, these here I'll do in regular time, and then the rest I'll do in a time lapse. I think now, for the third time, I think I have it right. See, I think that, to me, this is green, I think. So we'll see how they interact. So that's, I'm gonna say that's green. That is my green. This is my springtime green. Also, if you grew up in a farm, I remember as a child really being impressed. Grew up in a farm. My dad used to be a farmer, and I remember being inspired as a child. This is like one of my earliest memories. You know, it seems like there's a day where overnight, after the plants, after the crops are planted, it seemed like overnight they just spring out of the earth. And I don't remember if it was corn or sorghum, but I remember being very much impressed with how the field one day was just brown, and then you would go see it the next day, and you had this beautiful little green sprouts coming out of the earth. And that memory of that green is what I try and capture. Okay, so I've got my green, and I'm gonna try and make yellow green. I'm gonna push this really towards the bright. I want it to be very much towards the yellow. And that experience of seeing that green as a child, that just was magical, you know, seeing the earth, the ground transform like from one day to the other. And I remember as a child, you know, with some colored pencils trying to recreate, you know, that effect of that fresh green sprouts coming out of the earth. That's one of the earliest memories that I have of, I would say, of being inspired. You know, that's the first memory of inspiration, of being moved by something that was so striking or so beautiful that I wanted to reproduce it or recreate it. And that's why I start with green. I guess that's why I'm starting off with green. See, I think this is brighter. I would even venture even brighter than that. So I'm gonna use most of this yellow just for this mixing here. And then, of course, years later, I remember walking, maybe I was 13, walking to school in a spring day, I guess the first day of spring, and walking to school early in the morning and just seeing all the trees with their fresh leaves, freshly green. And also being very moved by how beautiful they looked. And again, it was some green like this, very vibrant, very intense, but very pure. And I guess later on, I discovered the poem by Robert Frost, "Nothing Gold Can Stay," which talks about the beauty of the first green during springtime. I can't recite the poem. At a certain point, I memorized that poem because when I first read that poem, it resonated with me from those experiences as a child. And that's the beauty of art, you know. Just, I don't know, going off in a tangent here, but here you have a poem by Robert Frost. I mean, he lived in New England. He was the nation's poet appointed by Kennedy. So I want to say he was from Massachusetts, or he was writing about New England. But he, like any great art, you know, great art touches on some universal themes, something that anybody can relate to. And so here I am, a child and a teenager growing up in northern Mexico and in South Texas. And when I read those poems by Robert Frost, or that poem, I totally understood what he was talking about in a very profound way. So I'm gonna use this leftover yellow to make my blue-green. Again, it's easier with two palette knives. I might need more glue. I think on here, I think this is the blue-green. Well, actually, I think it's something between these two. I think right now I have this one, but I need a little bit more blue. And then I'll paint them in. I'll get some more blue. And I'm using ultramarine for my blue here, but You could also use cobalt blue. Just cobalt blue gets a little bit more pricey. But I prefer ultramarine for this assignment. If you want to get really pretty colors, instead of ultramarine, you can do cerulean blue, and you will get some very, very beautiful colors. I want to say a little bit more. Actually, a lot more, because it has to be an in between these two, and I felt it was too much that way. And see, I'm actually not mixing that much color. I think this is good. So I'm gonna go ahead and paint that in. And I'm gonna clean this because there's green, and I don't want that to mix with the red when I make the violets, because then I'll end up making brown. So I'm gonna grab my little brush here. And I've got a good amount of paint here so that I can spread it around. You don't want to have this look transparent. I think this is the brush I used last time, or maybe one a little bit bigger. We got green. And see, because I have a good amount of paint, I can move it around. Green. And I'm gonna clean, it looks like it's a dirty rag, but the paint is dry, so it's not gonna mix, it's not gonna really matter. But it's tainted. So now I'm gonna use put in yellow green. Again, you want to have a good amount of paint in there, but you do want to make it so that it's not too streaky and too thick. And I went off the boundary there, but I will go back and paint the background gray so that it looks neater. So there you've got yellow, green, and green. I don't know if I'm happy with I don't know. I'm gonna put yellow. See, again, not until you've got everything on here, all the colors, can you actually judge them correctly. I'm gonna paint this in. I think that life experience, I've been inspired by those green sprouts. Always makes me unhappy with my greens. feel like it's not as nice as I wanted it to be, as beautifully colorful or as impressive. Again, you want a good amount of paint on your brush here so you can get good coverage. Now I feel it should be brighter. I'm gonna stick with that for now. Again, it's not, my yellow greens are not as beautiful as I would like them to be. Can never get to that ideal green. And now for my blue green. And then we'll do blue. Of course, there are emotional connections or associations, emotional associations with color. I'm gonna go with the blue. And you know, we're all familiar with those connections. You know, blue, clearly very easy to make the connection of the emotion associated with blue. You know, of course, it stands for sadness. You know, what's the symbolism of colors? You know, green, of course, is hope. Rebirth, I guess, also. You know, an interesting story, or I don't know if this is like dating advice, but I remember watching a fashion designer, you know, he was talking about colors. And he was saying, he was presenting his clothing line for men, and he had used a lot of blue for the outfits, you know, the different types of things he had designed. And of course, this was on Spanish TV, and he was saying that his inspiration for using blue, and I don't know if I can translate this into, you know, if I can make the translation, but he would say, you know, in Spanish there's that saying that every woman, according to him, you know, wanted their príncipe azul, you know, their, I guess it translates into like their knight in shiny armor, but in Spanish, príncipe azul means is like your prince, you know, dressed in blue. And he was saying, you know, to help, I guess, or to sell his fashion line, he was hoping, you know, men would make that connection when they would see that color, you know, that it would they would see that connection with that saying of, you know, of women wanting to find their príncipe azul. So I thought, you know, I thought that was just kind of interesting. I never thought of it that way, but it might be a color of handsomeness. I don't know. I don't know if that's the proper word. So I've got my greens, and now I'm going to jump over to my orange. I'll do orange, yellow, orange, and red orange. And so I, again, yellow, get our primaries, yellow and red. See, this to me is looking like red orange. So see, I switched to the clean palette knife. I think this maybe getting closer. Yeah, a little bit more yellow. I'm just gonna put here a nice amount of yellow. Van Gogh loved yellow. It was the color for him. It was the color of happiness, something that evaded him throughout his short life. And well, you cannot have a discussion of color without Van Gogh coming into mind. I mean, there's this story that has been fed to us about Van Gogh, about being this passionate, insane artist. And well, clearly he had some issues. But I would recommend it to everybody. I have read some, not all. There's a book about his letters to his brother Theo. Okay, before I keep going, I like this for my orange, so I'm gonna make yellow orange. And in those letters, Vincent is incredibly articulate, and I guess letter writing at that time, it was I guess writing letters like that has become a lost art, you know. Now we text and we email. Back then, you had to write a letter, take days, weeks, maybe months to get to its destination. And so you were more careful in writing it. But they're beautiful, beautiful letters where he talks very much in depth about color and what he's trying to do as an artist. So he was not just this intensely passionate, irrational person, but he was a very intelligent man. I think oftentimes we forget that about him. That's what those letters reveal: his intelligence, his sensitivity, and in the clarity of his thought and purpose, what he was trying to do. And there's that, you know, that image we have of him as being the starving artist, and he might have struggled, but he came from a very well-to-do family. If you look up the Van Goghs, if you read some books on them, his family for generations was known for being art dealers, and so he was. And not every family is an art dealer. It's a, you know, it takes a certain type of family to go into the art business. And it's usually a family that is well-to-do financially. And I think because they were in the art business, his whole family was in the art business, his family was very smart in marketing him. I mean, I think he's a wonderful artist. I had a chance to visit the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam, and he was so prolific. You look at the amount of paintings in that museum. I mean, it's not a huge museum like the Metropolitan or like the Louvre, but just to see how many paintings he produced in just 10 years. And, I mean, it's a good-sized museum. It has so many of his paintings and drawings. And then there's many others that are spread throughout the world. I mean, he was incredibly prolific and just painting all the time. So I mean, I'm not trying to diminish his, you know, I think it'd be impossible to diminish his accomplishments. But his family was very much aware of the art business. So I'm gonna go here. Into my yellow orange. Well, his brother, Theo, was an art dealer that introduced Vincent to all the major artists, impressionist artists living in Paris, or they're not only in Paris and throughout France. So there's my yellow orange. You know, in contrast to the earth palette, here we will have we shouldn't have any problems in matching colors when we start painting. I'm gonna put a little bit of medium here so that that's what I'm noticing, that it won't, because I'm using a soft brush, kind of hard to move. So this will be my orange. I'm using a square brush to help me get this kind of crisp line work. But also the Van Gogh family, they've suffered many tragedies. Maybe 7 years ago, somewhere around there, one of the members of that family, he was a documentary filmmaker. I believe he was executed by a Muslim extremist. I want to say it was in Amsterdam. I guess he had made a documentary that did not please the Muslim extremists. A little bit more medium. More paint. So there we got red, orange. And then we'll do red, and then we'll do my favorite color. I love red violet. Let me fix this here. Now the names of colors are interesting. Sometimes students will say, like, I can't mix this forest green or this aqua. And really, I mean, those names, mean, there's some other more exotic names for colors, you know, topaz, vermilion. I mean, they're just poetic. They don't really say much or describe the color accurately. I had a friend that, well, he was an art student when I was an art student, and we would hang out, you know, just go for drinks, you know, and just do what, you know, what buddies do. And he was a colorist. He loved color. I'm more of a tonalist, more of a draftsman. I try and be as good of a colorist as I can be, but I think that's one of my limitations. I don't have the natural ability for color that some other artists do have. And we would hang out together. We would hang out, and we would see something, you know, we would see, you know, let's say we saw a person with a red shirt, and I would say some cadmium red with a little bit of cadmium yellow and a little bit of white. And then he would rebuttal, you know, he would say, no, some vermilion, which is another type of, you know, paint that comes in the tube, you know, some vermilion with some lemon yellow, a little bit of blue, and white. So we would have these ongoing discussions, you know, whatever we looked at, we would try and we would spend a lot of time, you know, just joking around like this, trying to figure out how to mix certain colors that attracted us from wherever we were hanging out, you know. And I think, you know, you guys should do that. You should look at nature, at people, at anything, pretty much. And think, how would I recreate that color? How would I recreate that green? How would I recreate that red on that sign, on that car? So now I'm making violet. And you know, these go right here. So opposite the brightest colors, you will have the darkest colors, right? Violet, blue, violet, red, violet. And these become challenging to tell what they look like. So like this, how does it really look like? Well, I'm gonna have to put a little bit of white. I think that's a good violet. And then to make red violet, I'm gonna take a lot of red. Put some of this in there. And I'm gonna incorporate this into the red violet. These are beautiful colors. I'm gonna get some white. And I'm gonna use a little bit of this because I don't think I have enough of my violet. I'm gonna use red violet and put a lot of blue into it to make my blue violet. A little bit of white just to figure out what this is gonna look like. Okay, yeah, that looks good. It's blue violet. So I'm gonna go ahead and paint those in. So this video's already going on 15 minutes. Time just flies when mixing colors. For any art project, there's never enough time. I'm gonna go in with this first. Maybe I put too much medium there. Right off the bat, this looks a little too red, but we'll see at the end when I'm done with the color wheel. I'll see what I decide to do. Change it up. So it's red violet. Now we're gonna go with violet. And then blue violet. And there you have it. 54 minutes of mixing. I'm going to show you what you're gonna do in these rows when we did the earth palette, we had a value scale here. But what we're gonna do on these with a fully chromatic color wheel, is we're going to neutralize complements, and also in a way we're gonna darken and lighten. We're gonna darken yellow, and we're gonna lighten violet. But we're gonna lighten it, you know, we're gonna make it less intense as well. So on this first row we have violet, and on this side we're gonna put yellow, you know, because they're opposite, so they're complements. And then on this one we're gonna mix, you can see on this side we're gonna mix this value or this tint with this one, so it should give us a slightly dark neutral. And I mean, neutrals are also browns, so we're gonna be making brown in these spaces. And then on this we're gonna mix this with this, and it'll give us that value, and you know, that and that, and the lightest. So it'll gradate from dark, you know, to light. Cadmium yellow light is the highest value. It's a high key color. Its value is very light. And opposite the light is you've got the darkest color. You got violet. And when you put, you know, complements next to each other, they make each other look brighter. But in this case, we're gonna mix them together and make neutrals or make browns, and they're going to go from darkest to lightest. On the other ones that are further down, you're gonna do the same thing, but with the other complements. Then you're gonna do green and red, and then blue and orange. So like where you've got violet, under that you're gonna put red, and under the red over here you're gonna put blue. On this side you're gonna have yellow, green, and orange. And I decided on that order because these will be darker in value and these will be lighter in value. And so I'll show you how you're gonna mix this. So this, we've got our darkest tint, and you're gonna mix the darkest tint of violet with the darkest tint, darkest, because this is still very light. You're gonna mix them, as I'm doing here, until they become neutral. See, they're canceling each other out, and it becomes a brown. And a neutral should be neither violet nor yellow, and I think I like the way this turned out. I think this looks pretty neutral. But they will, you know, these combinations of complements will give you different browns, even though you're trying to make them neutral. So here we've got this one. It's gonna go right there. See, it's very much like a skin tone. And see, this neutral, if you put it over the violet, it looks yellowish. If you put it over the yellow, it looks like violet. See this? See there, it looks yellowish. There it looks violet. That's what happens with neutrals. So I'm just gonna do this one. You follow the same example and do the rest, of course, with green and red, and then blue and orange, the other complements. So that's one of them. So I'll set it aside here, and then we'll move on to the second one here. Second tint, and we'll mix it about equal amounts. And this again, see, like there looks maybe too violet. I accidentally pick up that clump of white. See there. Let me see how this looks. Keep mixing. Maybe a little bit more yellow. Some dry paint in there. I think there it's neither or. It's not yellow and it's not violet. And again, let me show you what happens here. See, there looks yellowish. It looks violetish. I don't even know that's a word, but yeah, there's more violet on top of yellow. Looks more yellow on top of violet because it's neutral. And so what happens? What happens here is that the violet that's behind it subtracts the violet from the mixture optically. And this is not happening. There's no mixing or subtracting. But visually it subtracts the violet that's on here, and therefore it looks more yellow. And here the opposite thing happens. The background yellow visually subtracts yellow from the mixture, and therefore it makes it look more violet. Now I'll do the next two. So good. Alright. I'll mix it over here. Sit on camera. I don't know if I'm off the camera here. And about equal amounts of yellow. There's so much to learn in a painting class about value, about color. See, this is a nice neutral. Streak of yellow. That's why you need two palette knives. Scrape off the bottom. You see there? It needs a little bit more yellow. Looks too violet. I think this is much better. So you make your mixture, and you will see there looks more yellow, more violet. And I'll mix the lightest ones. Mix some of this. over on this side. See how this looks. Violet, yellow. I still think it's a little more yellow. I'm gonna put more yellow into the mix. Okay, so this is how you're going to do these columns. These are columns, or no, not columns, columns when they're going up and down. These are rows. They're yellowish and more purplish. And now I'm just gonna paint them in. So that's how you do those rows. That's how you go about it. Let me get a brush. Got this little brush here. And so I've got violet there. And this is the one that goes here. Again, you want to have enough paint on your brush so that you can, move it around. And even though it's a canvas that has no paint underneath, you're just the acrylic ground. Because I have enough paint on my brush, I'm able to move the paint around. So that is my first neutral. Then we move on to our second. There should be a change. You should notice a change in value. Might be minimal here. And see right there, when they're next to each other, you can tell some differences. Like I think now, this looks more yellow next to this. Again, because it's next to this pure violet. So this makes it look more yellow. See how color interacts with everything that's around it. And see, I think this one looks more violet because this one looks so much more yellow. So now I'll just fill this in. Now seeing this one, I might have to go back and make a correction. I think that turned out too yellow. This seems to work in that one. They relate. I think that one is too yellow. So I retract my previous statement. I don't think that's next to the. That might be part of it. I'm gonna mix more of it, and I still have some of that there. I'm gonna put a little bit more violet so that it's not as a yellow. I think all these relate nicely to each other. They're all neutral. But yeah, this is how you finish off this section. Yes, and this one sticks out as too yellowish. And so I'm gonna mix a little bit more violet to this here. Before I do before I do yellow here. And we'll just try it. I realized I made a mistake. I received a text on my phone, which I'm using to record this, and that kind of threw me off. Let's mix that one again. So it's this. Mix it over here. This. And this here. Now this is going to be hard because I would have to scrape that off. I don't want to do that. It still looks too yellow. What I did wrong here is I used the pure violet without any white. So yeah, this is, see, it ends up just like that. Well, you know, this is the trial and error. We'll just leave it as it is. We'll just leave it as it is. Never mind. I ended up with the same mixture. Now over here, make sure my brush is clean. I'm just gonna yellow. Here, just a pure yellow. And that's how you're going to do this portion of the color wheel, or this color mixing assignment. Now, this is the color wheel, this is separate. Overall, I think it turned out well. So there you go.